Have you ever reached a point where nothing works anymore? No matter how many times you try journaling, meditate, or even scroll through social media to find some relief, it all feels the same, empty. You might even think, what's wrong with me? You're not alone. So what if I told you that the reason behind this feeling isn't your fault, and the solution isn't what you've been taught all along? Welcome to Quiet Discipline Method. If you've ever felt like you're stuck in a loop where self-care doesn't work, you're probably living through something deeper than mere fatigue. You're experiencing an emotional exhaustion that many of us hide from the world. It's the kind of tiredness that doesn't go away after a night's sleep, the kind of burnout where even your favorite hobby feels pointless. It's not a lack of willpower or a failure on your part. It's the silent effect of chronic stress. The world doesn't tell you this, yet most people are living with it. Now, imagine for a moment, what if the reason you can't feel joy from self-care isn't because you're doing it wrong, but because your brain is simply too tired to process it? What if, all along, you've been unknowingly fighting against something far deeper than you realize? This isn't just a bad day, week, or month. This is something many face daily, but rarely talk about. It's the trap that makes you question everything you thought you knew about taking care of yourself. And right now, I'm going to show you why it's happening, and more importantly, how to break free from it. Before we dive deeper, take a moment to breathe and remind yourself that this moment is enough. If you've ever been in a place where nothing seemed to help, you've come to the right place. But first, don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Discipline Method to support us, so we can keep delivering content that helps you on this journey. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to make a change only to feel completely stuck, like your body and mind were fighting against it? Answer with A or B in the comments below, and let's talk about it. A, yes, I've felt stuck and unable to make progress despite my efforts. B, no, I've always felt like self-care works for me. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
So what exactly is happening when the things that once brought us joy seem to lose their power? The answer lies deeper than just feeling burnt out or exhausted. It has everything to do with the silent force of chronic stress and how it subtly impacts our ability to experience pleasure, even from the simplest forms of self-care. Chronic stress, a term we often hear but don't fully understand, is more than just a result of too much work or personal pressure. It's a persistent, underlying state that slowly erodes your emotional and mental resources over time. When stress becomes chronic, it doesn't just make you tired, it fundamentally alters how your brain responds to pleasure and motivation. This is what psychologists call anhedonia, a condition where your brain struggles to experience joy or satisfaction from activities that previously made you feel alive. It's not about laziness or lack of willpower. This is your brain reacting to prolonged stress by essentially shutting down its ability to process enjoyment. Imagine waking up one day to find that even your favorite activities, things that once filled you with energy, now feel like chores. The joy of reading a good book, the peace of a quiet walk, or the comfort of a hot cup of coffee, everything seems muted. That's the weight of chronic stress. It's like trying to hear music when your speakers are broken. No matter how much you turn up the volume, the sound remains distant, flat, and empty. This is not weakness or something you can simply push through. It's your body's defense mechanism, trying to protect itself from the overwhelming strain that's been building up for months or even years. The longer you stay in this state, the harder it becomes to feel anything at all. You might even start doubting yourself, wondering why it's so hard to care about the things you once loved. The problem isn't you. It's how stress has altered your brain's ability to react to the world around you. What makes this even harder is the fact that many of us are unaware of how deeply stress can affect us. Society often teaches us to just keep going and push through our emotions, We're expected to handle everything with a smile, to keep functioning despite our inner turmoil. But the reality is that when stress piles up, it robs us of the very tools we need to take care of ourselves. It's a vicious cycle. Stress leads to numbness, which leads to more stress, and so on. The good news? You're not doomed to stay in this place. Understanding this process is the first step to breaking free. Chronic stress may have dulled your ability to feel joy, but it hasn't destroyed your capacity to heal. The key is recognizing that this emotional numbness isn't a personal failure. It's a signal from your body that something deeper needs attention. As we continue this journey, we'll explore how to reclaim those moments of joy, even in the face of overwhelming stress. But first, it's important to accept that this is a process, not an overnight fix. Healing begins with small steps, and the first step is acknowledging the impact that stress has had on your emotional well-being. You can't heal what you don't understand, and once you grasp how stress affects your brain, you can start the work of restoring balance, one small action at a time.
Now that we understand how chronic stress affects our ability to experience joy and satisfaction, the next question is, how can we start to feel better when the typical methods of self-care no longer work? The answer lies not in grand gestures or complex rituals, but in the smallest, most manageable actions. Things so simple they can often go unnoticed, but have the power to reset our minds and bodies in ways we've forgotten were possible. One of the most effective strategies to counteract the emotional numbness caused by chronic stress is micro-self-care. Unlike traditional self-care practices that may require a significant amount of time or effort, micro-self-care is about breaking down care into its simplest components. It's about doing small, intentional actions that help your nervous system reset, even if just for a moment. These small steps, often overlooked, provide enough relief to keep you going when the bigger tasks feel out of reach. Think about it this way. When you're overwhelmed, the idea of taking a long walk, preparing a healthy meal, or sitting down for a long meditation session may feel impossible. It feels like there's no energy left to tackle even the simplest forms of self-care. This is where micro-self-care comes in. It doesn't demand much from you, yet it can make a big difference. It could be something as simple as splashing your face with cold water to wake up your senses, standing up and stretching for 30 seconds to relieve tension in your body, or even just taking one deep breath. Each small action helps interrupt the cycle of stress, providing a momentary reset. These tiny gestures offer just enough relief to remind your brain and body that things can feel a little lighter, even if just for a few seconds. They provide an opening for the energy you need to take on bigger steps, even if you're not ready to do it all at once. What makes micro-self-care so effective is that it doesn't require you to feel like doing something. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment when motivation strikes or the overwhelming feeling of stress is gone. It's about choosing to take action despite how you feel. This is why it works. When you can't force yourself to take on big tasks, focusing on small, easily achievable actions allows you to feel like you're in control, even when everything else seems out of your reach. It's these little victories that accumulate and gradually make a profound difference in your emotional and mental well-being. Another powerful approach is sensory self-care. When stress and emotional numbness take hold, it's often difficult to feel anything at all. That's because the part of our brain that processes sensory input can become overwhelmed or dulled by prolonged stress. Sensory self-care is about reconnecting to the present moment through the senses, whether that's through touch, smell, sight, or sound. It's about breaking through the mental fog of stress and grounding yourself in something real and tangible. This technique is not only useful for managing stress, but is also commonly used in trauma recovery.
By tuning into the senses, you can reconnect with your environment and experience life more vividly. For example, take a moment to ask yourself, what's one thing I can smell right now? What's one thing I can hear? What texture can I feel? These simple sensory checks can pull you back from the overwhelming thoughts in your head and into the present moment, where you can start to feel grounded again. It's a simple way of telling your brain, you are safe, and right now, you are here. It may sound trivial, but these small acts of grounding are essential when you feel like you're floating away in a sea of stress and exhaustion. There's something deeply powerful about the sense of touch. It could be the warmth of a cup of tea in your hands, the soft texture of your favorite blanket, or the feeling of your feet on the ground. These simple sensory experiences can break the cycle of stress and help you reconnect with your body. In a world where everything feels overwhelming and out of control, sensory self-care is like a lifeline that reminds you that despite everything, you are still here, you are still connected. Finally, when we feel stuck in our routines and trapped by our own stress, sometimes the best thing to do is step outside of ourselves. Imitating the routines of others can be a surprisingly effective way to break free from the mental block caused by chronic stress. Research has shown that something as simple as copying a daily routine from someone else, whether it's a friend, a family member, or even someone you admire, can help you regain structure and purpose in your life. This doesn't mean copying every detail of someone's life, but borrowing a small habit that could help you feel a sense of accomplishment. Maybe it's following a morning routine someone else swears by, like having a specific drink before starting the day. Maybe it's trying a podcast someone you trust has recommended, or following a playlist that's worked wonders for others. The idea is to step outside your own head, break the pattern of stress and numbness, and let someone else's actions guide you until you're ready to create your own. It's like having a temporary blueprint for a life that feels more manageable, a life that doesn't feel completely consumed by the weight of your stress. These small changes, however insignificant they may seem at first, help reignite the feeling that life can still be enjoyable, that things can still be meaningful, and that there's a way out of the cycle of stress. It's important to understand that this journey isn't about sudden, miraculous change. It's about giving yourself permission to take small steps, to make tiny improvements, and to show yourself the same patience you would offer a dear friend. When nothing else seems to work, sometimes it's the smallest gestures that make all the difference. Each small action you take, whether it's through micro self-care, sensory grounding, or borrowing someone else's routine, is a step toward reclaiming the life you deserve. Slowly but surely, these steps will help you rediscover the joy and peace that have felt so distant for so long. And while it may take time, these small changes are the foundation of your healing, one tiny step at a time. As we begin to incorporate small actions like micro self-care and sensory grounding into our lives, we also need to remind ourselves that self-care doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, the pressure to perform self-care perfectly is one of the greatest obstacles we face when we're struggling to feel better. The reality is that self-care doesn't require elaborate rituals, perfect execution, or even a picture-perfect outcome. It only requires that we show up for ourselves in whatever way we can, even on the hardest days. The truth is, life doesn't always give us the luxury of time or energy to follow through with grand self-care plans. Sometimes simply getting through the day can feel like an accomplishment in itself, and that's okay. There's no shame in acknowledging that some days will be more challenging than others. Self-care isn't about living up to unrealistic standards. It's about accepting that there will be days when the best you can do is just make it through. And in those moments, that's enough. There's a powerful sense of freedom that comes when we let go of the idea that self-care needs to look a certain way. We no longer have to compare ourselves to the curated images we see online or feel guilty because our routines don't match what others are doing. Instead, we learn to embrace the idea that even the smallest acts of self-care matter. It could be something as simple as making a cup of tea when you're tired, or even just taking a few moments to breathe deeply and check in with yourself. These moments, though seemingly insignificant, are the building blocks of a stronger, healthier you. And here's the thing. You don't need to be fixed or perfect to practice self-care. You don't need to be in a great mood or feel energized to take small steps toward nurturing yourself. Sometimes self-care can be as simple as acknowledging that you're not okay, and that's a perfectly valid place to start. The world around us constantly tells us that we need to be productive, flawless, and always on. But real self-care is about showing up for yourself in the messiness of life, accepting that you're human, and treating yourself with kindness despite everything. Self-care is not a linear process. Some days it might feel like a constant struggle, while other days it might feel easier. But what matters is that you're taking the time to care for yourself, no matter how small the action may seem. It's about starting where you are and understanding that even the smallest gesture of kindness to yourself is a step in the right direction. So, when you feel like you failed at self-care, remember, you haven't. You've simply been working through a tough time. And in those moments, it's okay to just be. That, too, is part of the healing process.
As we reflect on the small, seemingly insignificant steps that make up our self-care practices, it's important to understand that this journey doesn't end with just the actions we take. It also extends to how we view ourselves along the way. The process of caring for ourselves is deeply intertwined with patience and compassion. So often we find ourselves caught in the trap of comparing our progress to others or to some imagined ideal. But true self-care is about recognizing and embracing where we are without judgment. This is why self-care doesn't need to be a grand spectacle or a series of perfect actions. It doesn't need to be Instagram-worthy or adhere to some arbitrary standard. It's enough to show up, even if you can only manage small, imperfect steps. In fact, sometimes the most powerful form of self-care is simply getting through the day, acknowledging that you did your best with what you had. When we let go of the expectation that every aspect of our life needs to be flawless, we open ourselves to the freedom of just being without the pressure of performing or meeting external standards. Think about it. On days when you feel overwhelmed, when the weight of everything seems too much to bear, self-care can be as simple as allowing yourself to rest. And rest doesn't always mean sleeping. Sometimes it means taking a break from the constant demands of life and giving yourself permission to pause, to breathe, to be present in the moment without feeling like you're failing. Giving yourself permission to rest without guilt is a profound act of self-love. As we wrap up this reflection on self-care, it's essential to remember that the practice isn't about perfection or consistency in the traditional sense. It's about the intention behind the action. It's about creating a relationship with yourself that is kind, understanding, and patient. It's about honoring your limits and recognizing that you don't need to be everything to everyone. The most important thing is that you are here, you are trying, and that is enough. So the next time you feel like self-care isn't working or that you've somehow failed, pause and remind yourself of this truth. You're not failing. You're navigating through a process that's messy, uncertain, and at times painful. But with every small action you take, with every moment of patience you show yourself, you are healing. And that's all that truly matters. Take it one step at a time and trust that the journey, no matter how imperfect, is leading you to a place of greater peace and acceptance.
In conclusion, the journey to self-care isn't about achieving perfection or following some idealistic routine. It's about showing up for yourself, even in the smallest ways, and treating yourself with kindness and patience. Life doesn't always allow us the luxury of perfect conditions, but that doesn't mean we aren't worthy of taking care of ourselves. The true power of self-care lies in its simplicity and its flexibility. It's about taking tiny steps, allowing space for rest, and acknowledging that healing is not always linear. Every small act of care, no matter how insignificant it seems, is a victory. The lesson to take away from this is that you don't need to be perfect to practice self-care. Life will always have its ups and downs, but by focusing on small, meaningful actions, you can begin to rebuild your emotional well-being. Start where you are, with what you have. Be patient with yourself, and take one small step at a time. The real change comes not from trying to force happiness or healing, but from allowing yourself the space to heal naturally, at your own pace. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What's one small act of self-care that you found helpful? Please comment below and share your insights with others. Don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Discipline Method to support the channel and encourage us to create more content like this in the future.